Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce.
We could do a whole podcast, by the way, on hockey if you want.
We should. Wait, why wouldn't we? Is that your thing?
Well, it is my thing, but your listeners might, tune out after a couple of minutes.
I don't know. We did a podcast a couple weeks ago on the Utah BYU rivalry, which is not involved in shipping at all.
Well, you're the host, so you take this wherever you want to go. But
we're gonna go.
It's my thing, and I went to a preseason game, and it was just despicable, the production value that was displayed during that, and so I wrote them a several-page essay.
No, you didn't.
About what kind of lights, the fact that you don't sing the national anthem from like the loge section, like national anthems are sung on the ice. You don't just have a DJ playing in between. You've got to have chants that become ingrained in the fan base. And I went last night, and either they knew what they were doing or they read my essay and really took it to heart and changed the production value, because it wasn't spectacular, but it was really good. And I've been to a lot of arenas, like when you go to Vegas or Los Angeles or Madison Square Garden, like those people know how to do things outside of the product on the ice.
Yeah.
And Utah's got to get there. So they're on their way.
I think that now we've been recording the whole time, correct? Okay. I want to make sure that we keep that piece in the recording, because I think that's the perfect place to start.
Great.
Like, this is you. This, by the way, Matt Bijur, HONK Technologies, and it's a fascinating company. You're the COO, but what you just described, I feel like that's exactly what a COO would do when he goes and sees and watches an event.
Precisely.
He would write a 2-page essay. And by the way, I noticed those things. That was my first experience with Utah hockey.
Yeah.
And I noticed those things. I saw where the young lady was singing the national anthem present, right outside of the ice with the flags and everything else. The bear.
Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about the bear, as the Jazz Bear is also the mascot for the... I think I could write a 2-page essay on doing a different mascot. But the bear was around the arena, and he had the little drum, and he was trying to get the chants going, and there were production elements that I think can be improved, but it looked like they had some reason behind all of the stuff that they were doing.
Yeah, I think they have the basics, and by the way, I'm also noticing a trend after reading the news about the first game regarding the levels of alcohol consumption. Did you read any of those articles?
No.
They sold more beer at the first game of the Utah Hockey Club in the history of the Delta Center than any time in the history of the Delta Center. And, I think it's maybe attributed to bringing in a new, like a slightly different kind of fan base that really wants to go there. And what I've noticed is, I don't know if you saw it last night, but on the camera, there's lots of people chugging
all the time.
Did you see that?
Every time they put, and then they did it on kids who were chugging those frazzle
Slurpees
drinks,
or whatever.
Yes. But yeah, there's a...
And I'm noticing this trend, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I can see it becoming a Utah Hockey Club thing where if the camera goes on you, that's the new mandate.
You're chugging something.
Yeah,
chugging
which is real fraternity-ish, which is, not probably where they want to go, but they got to be careful not to, go down that road too far. But anyway, they're getting better at the production value, and it's exciting. I love having a hockey team here. Like, the more professional sports that come to this area, I would love a Major League Baseball team. So I'm a sports fan, and I think it'd be great for the city.
I think so too, and it really was a great experience. But we were just talking about you grew up, or maybe not grew up, but you you call yourself a hockey guy.
Yeah.
Did you grow up playing the sport or just being engaged? Okay, so you grew up playing the sport.
I did. I grew up in southern Connecticut where I played, and my family moved to Toronto when I was pretty young. And of course, that's the mecca of youth hockey and all of hockey.
Not to get off track, but are the Maple Leafs going to win a Stanley Cup? It's like, aren't they always one of the most talented teams?
They are.
Yeah.
What, for not being a hockey guy, how do you know so much about hockey?
Well, I'm not a hockey guy, but I like hockey. So I kind of loosely follow along.
Yeah, you really know your stuff. They're perennially good, but not and they've if you do not have a premier goaltender, it's really hard to win everything. If you saw last night, Utah is lacking a premier goaltender. And for as much as I love those two guys, they just don't have it.
And in fact, switched goaltenders midway through the second period.
And it didn't help if you saw what the backup goaltender allowed. But but you need that's what you need in order to win. And Toronto hasn't had that for as long as I've been watching them, since the 80s when I was in Toronto. So anyway, I did play there. My family moved to London, England, where I went to high school. And as you can imagine, ice hockey in the 1990s in the United Kingdom was
non-existent?
Pretty much non-existent. So I had to take a break. I did eventually play back in college again in Vermont, and but that was the end of the career. You know, if you miss those 4 years, that's pretty pivotal in terms of
your
making it to the
years.
NHL. So so that the dreams were squashed there, but nevertheless, it's been a good ride since, and I grew up playing.
It's a great sport. It's a fantastic sport. And by the way, there are two things. There's nothing like playoff hockey. Like
nothing.
I'm talking about college football bowl games and playoffs in the NFL and Major League Baseball and MLS, like all of the other leagues.
The World Cup comes up a lot. People love that, right?
But nothing seems to match the intensity of playoff hockey, and it's a noticeable difference. Like, you're watching the game last night, it's good. It's physical, it's good, had a couple fights.
Right.
Playoff hockey is a different animal.
Absolutely. Like, you couldn't have said it better. When all sports come to their pinnacle, right, at the end of the season in one way or another, it gets exciting. But there is nothing. 4 rounds, best of 7 series. You get to watch every night for 2.5, 3 months of the most intense, most physical. It's extraordinary. I couldn't agree with you more.
The other great thing about hockey is the way you finish a game with a tie and you go into sudden death.
It's great for the fans.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fascinating. What about, why did you move around so much? Your family was Connecticut. Which part of Connecticut? Southern Connecticut?
Southern Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
just
then,
outside of New York.
Okay. And then Toronto.
Yeah. My dad's business moved us around, and it was great. You know, some people stay where they are their whole lives. Other people get to move around. There's pros and cons, but the benefits for me was just diversity, right? Of Toronto's a very diverse city. London is extraordinarily diverse. And the more you can, I think, expose your kids, go to my parents, and hopefully I'll try to expose my kids to cultures, different ethnicities, different religions, different belief systems. It's just it creates a more empathetic understanding of what people go through in the world in different social classes, different countries, and so I'm quite grateful that I got that, and it was just lucky. I just was along for the ride, but and especially in the business that I'm in now, where we are a nationwide business dealing with customers on the side of the road of all shapes, sizes,
Sure.
stripes. We're dealing with a service provider network that, just works their tails off every day to help people, in sticky situations, and having the empathy to understand what those people are going through, what those service providers go through on a day-to-day basis, real life emergencies in a lot of cases, and very risky situations. Just having that appreciation for those people and empathy, I think, is really important.
Well, especially maybe not especially, but in Utah, it's a great place. It's a great place to grow up. It's a great place to live, and you don't necessarily want to leave. You get kind of stuck in your bubble, but
That's right.
there's real value in spreading your wings and getting out to see all of the other things that are happening throughout your community and other communities. And with that in mind, you ended up from London. You ended up coming back to the States and going to college at Middlebury.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
That's funny because I have a nephew at Middlebury.
No
currently.
kidding.
Yeah, he plays soccer out there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, tell me about that experience. Small liberal arts college?
Yes. I had family members who had gone there, and so it was a great experience. But in kind of what you're talking about with Utah, right? Vermont and rural Vermont is similar, right? In that if you let yourself be in that bubble for too long, your worldview can get a little bit maybe insular, and so it was a great experience. I joined a bluegrass band in college. I played the banjo.
I see that on all of your stuff. That's one of the things that you list.
Yeah,
I play the banjo.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you try to embrace all the weird parts of my life that I still find some value in, and so played hockey there, played a lot of bluegrass music, and made great friends that I'm in touch with today. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, and then from Middlebury, all the way across the country to the West Coast.
Yes, although there was a stop in between, and that was Utah. Before
you ended up at Stanford.
Yeah.
And what? Okay, I didn't know about that. Tell me.
Right. So I coming out of college, I loved hockey. And so I said, I want to go work for the New York Rangers. And there are no jobs. You don't just, knock on the door and say, I'd like to work here. These teams have staffs of 10, 15, 20. It's not they're not big organizations. And it's more about who you know in those situations. And I didn't know really anyone, but there were two people on that team by the name of Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, who, if you've got some familiarity with hockey,
know anything about hockey,
they're on Mount Rushmore, right? Definitely. And so I made my way into that organization one way or the other to try to be adjacent, let's put it, to those guys. I'd be in the locker room walking around and just watching those guys, right? And then I'd watch them train every morning and play every night, and nothing better. Just a great experience. So, long story short, that didn't last too long. I wanted to do more than just that, and so anyway, I joined a company that was working on the Olympic Games.
Oh,
and that brought me out here in 2000 because, as everyone, well, I'm sure your audience is wider than Utah, but Utah obviously was the host in 2002, and so I worked on that for a while. Got the absolute privilege of living in Park City for those 2 years, working down here. So I commuted down here to work every day, and that drive down the canyon is stunning.
It's amazing,
as you know. And so very fortunate, and that's where I fell in love with Utah. Yeah. But as you said, from there moved on to California to do a little bit more school, and then obviously it's been a little bit of a ride between now and 25 years since I first lived in Utah to now coming back with a family, and it's been just an absolute tremendous experience.
Let me ask you before we get on to HONK Technologies, which is a great company. Tell me about your experience in Palo Alto and how meaningful that has been for your career.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about it. I just knew that going to school there would be a privilege, and so I moved there, and it really, the entrepreneurial DNA of that area is thick.
Mm-hmm.
You can't walk downtown without, and this was a while ago, I'm not positive the vibe today, I imagine it's similar, but you can't walk downtown without just the buzz of ideas going on around different companies, different concepts, and of course the courses that you're able to take there really lean into that, and instill that little bug in you of, boy, think creatively and really try to change the world in a positive way. And so it got into me, and pretty much set me on the career coming out of that experience.
And did you feel like that was, you were kind of in that realm of wanting to be an entrepreneur? Like that's okay.
Yes.
We had a podcast guest recently named Scott Huntsman, who he's an amazing guy. He's built a couple different companies and exited a couple different companies. He's on a third one right now. But he just said, his advice was, if you could spend a couple years on Wall Street and understanding finance.
Yep.
Like that could make all the difference in your career. But you found yourself in a similar, not necessarily finance, but a similar kind of atmosphere where everything was ever present, the buzz was ever present, and that's got to be. You probably still lean on that today. Maybe even the relationships you made back then, you may lean on those today.
For sure, it's intoxicating, and it's funny when you look back on your career, and I'm sure it's the same for you and most people, which is, being able to draw those lines backwards to say, well, I got into this company because of that person, and I only knew that person because of that sale I made in that previous, organization. And it's really, it's fun to draw those, that line, that historical thread through your career, to understand how people got to where they did. And even with HONK, I had started a company prior to HONK, and someone said, you really should try to hire this guy Corey for my previous company. And so I called him up on the phone, and he said, oh yeah, I'm working on something similar, we should talk about this. And I said, well, come on, join us. And he said, I'm thinking I might actually pivot to a new idea. The new idea was HONK.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hung up and I said, great, good luck with that. And then, not 9 months later, I was with a friend who said, you should talk to Corey. Have you ever met him? And he started this really cool company called HONK. And, he explained the idea to me, and I said, I know Corey, I should shut down what I'm doing right now and join him in launching this new business. Cause we were he was in the kind of idea phase, and he and I joined up with a guy named Rick, and we launched it, and we're still kind of pressing on here 10 years in from that day.
Yeah. Well, the importance of relationships and maintaining relationships and spreading your network, critical for business and outside of business success.
Yes.
So let's talk about HONK. I've done a little research. You and I have talked a little bit about it, but give us the 30,000 foot. What is HONK Technologies?
Yeah. So HONK is a technology platform that operates in the automotive logistics space, and that includes towing and roadside assistance, transport, salvage, warranty, and many other areas. It's a pretty big industry, and essentially we work with enterprises and small, medium-sized businesses who need to move vehicles between point A and point B. And of course, the way we started was the easy description was Uber for tow trucks. It was 2014. Uber and Lyft were about a year, maybe 2 years old. I can't remember exactly, but they were just starting to become fairly ubiquitous. And we said, well, Corey really, had an experience with his wife where
it's a good story.
She broke down on the 405 in Los Angeles, and within a few clicks, he had arrived on scene in an Uber to help her. But then once on scene, sitting in the car with her, it was like, okay, who are we going to call? How long is this going to take? We've all had that experience.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've broken down. And the first thing you think about is a swear word that I'm not going to say online.
Maybe
here, but,
use that in the hockey rink.
But we've all had that emotion, right? It's just so Corey, had this epiphany that it could be a lot better, and so we, as I say, he and I and Rick got together and we built the platform, and it took off right away. And so that was a business to consumer play at the beginning.
Okay, so let me just clarify that,
Sure.
because it's become much larger than that.
That's right.
So in the beginning, was it an app that just I would use, the individual would say, oh my gosh, I'm broken down, I'm on Honk, now I can arrange okay.
Exactly. You pay for it when you need it.
Yeah.
The incumbent in the space was AAA.
Yeah.
As everyone is aware. And, we just looked at their business and their model, and said, this is a pretty, they've been around a while, to be generous. And, we think there's an opportunity to do something that younger generations will gravitate towards, as in terms of, I'm just going to pay for this if I happen to need it.
Right.
Rather than, pay $100 a year in insurance,
To have
basically,
this,
to have
yes.
that peace of mind. You still have the peace of mind, but it's sitting in your phone.
Yes.
And our big value proposition was doing it better. How could we get there? Because there's two things that matter in that world, towing and roadside. It's how quickly do you get there, and how professional is the service provider who arrives. And so if we could do both of those better, then we thought we'd have a winning recipe. And we really did. There's a lot of reasons why we believe we do it better, which, we may or may not get into. But ultimately, to answer your question, yes, originally it was a business to consumer, pull out your phone, pay for it when you need it. And by the way, people can still do that today. They can download Honk from the App Store. It's free, and you pay for it when you need it.
Perfect.
And as you said, that's not the sole focus of our business. The business has taken off since that point, but that piece of our business still exists.
Well, that's good to know. I'm going to download. I'll download the app. I thought that the consumer portion had gone away, but that's great to know. That's great to know. Okay, so what in your evolution made you decide to pivot to the direction you're in today?
Yeah, great question. We were, rolling along, thousands and thousands of downloads a month, app downloads. Companies started knocking on our door to say, hey, we've heard about this technology platform you've built. Is there any chance that could be applied to the insured members of our insurance company or the rental car customers of our rental car company? And it kind of, hit us across the head, like that would have been pretty obvious. But we were still really young. We were only a year or so in, and really just trying to, tighten all the screws on the product itself when when they started knocking. But it also showed us the hunger in the industry for some alternative to what had existed previously in that B to B to C side of the industry.
Sure.
And so we pursued that and said this would be a much faster way to growth than going one by one. And so while we maintained that B2C side of our operations, we really leaned into some of those business development opportunities. And one of our first customers was Farmers Insurance, which are no slouch in the carrier world. Quite to the contrary, we regard them as probably the more innovative insurance company out there. And to their credit, there was a gentleman there by the name of Bobby Massey who had this vision that it could be better. And what I see from these guys at Honk convinces me that it will be better, and that we're going to take a chance on it. And they took an enormous chance for a company of that size to work with a company as young and new to the scene as Honk, was really an extraordinary move, and it changed our trajectory forever. Because once we did that and we started delivering, we use NPS as a kind of North Star for customer and client satisfaction and service provider satisfaction. We were delivering scores in the mid to high 80s on NPS, which for anyone familiar with NPS, it's a Apple, I think, operates in the 60s. And they traditionally are world class in terms of their product line. So it's very difficult to get to those levels, but we did it. And it felt so good, because when someone puts that kind of faith in you, like Bobby did, all you want to do is deliver, right? And just prove to his whole company he was right. People can take chances like that. You don't just have to buy from IBM, as they say, right? And we rewarded him, and they won awards in that company for the most innovative, like, new product line in their company. And so once that happened, of course, that helps then the other dominoes start to fall and say, well, Farmers Insurance trusts them, why can't we? And so it's just continued from that point where we've been. We mostly grew with insurance carriers and fleets, and now we're in the mode of expanding out to auto manufacturers and rental car companies and other down market players in this space that could use that elevated level of service, because at the end of the day, it's about ROI. And how do you connect that? You connect it because in a lot of these spaces, insurance, auto manufacturing, et cetera, the most frequent touch point is a breakdown on the side of the road. If you're an insurance carrier, you're not contacting people about their home burning down very often, or life insurance and all the other products that they offer. This is the most frequent touch point. So if you can wow someone, 15 minutes, 20 minutes arrival time, professional service provider, all of a sudden your affinity and your loyalty to Farmers, and in the insurance game, we all see the ads on TV all the time. People are jumping around all over the place. So the whole game is retention. And that's what we deliver, is we deliver a great experience that leads to those levels of retention that really are economically meaningful to these enterprises.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I have a couple questions coming out of all of that. One is, you went from a consumer-based app to working with farmers. What did that look like? Like, now, what is the interface now?
Yeah, it's the platform, the foundational elements of the platform were exactly the same. It was really just about exposing APIs, which are really just tunnels into other interfaces. And so, for example, on the within Farmers, in their app, you can just say I need roadside assistance, and all of a sudden it's just now plugging in our technology, largely unbeknownst.
So it's just
white
embedded.
label. Yeah,
it's embedded in Farmers, but it's Honk powered by Honk.
Powered by Honk, exactly.
Gotcha.
And everyone wants to maintain their brand message, and
Sure.
we're very good at partnering with companies and understanding what their brand message is and delivering that in the way that we power their experience.
Okay. Did that experience then with farmers open the floodgates for Honk in terms of, well, if we could do this with farmers, then we can do this with this provider and this provider and this. Tell me about that evolution.
It did, and we've been growing, rapidly ever since. One of the things though that was super important to us, and I think is different than some of the others that came up in our industry around the same time, is we were all entrepreneurs that came into this business, by the way, knowing nothing about towing and roadside assistance.
I didn't hear any of it in your background.
No, and so we looked at it from an angle that I think hadn't been looked at before, and people were doing just silly things in the industry. As one example, when we came in, we learned that the background checks that the incumbents in the industry were doing were just on the owner of a towing business, as opposed to at the individual driver level. And we said, why would any insurance company want to partner with that enterprise when the most important thing is the safety of that person, that end customer, that end motorist on the side of the road? And we said, we're going to background check every single driver in our network. We're going to pay for it. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to pay for it, and we're going to prioritize safety. And so to answer your question, the floodgates did open because a lot of other enterprises started seeing our demo and also listened to our philosophy about things like that, which was just fundamentally different from the way that incumbents had operated in the industry. Also, the network, the service provider network out there, we didn't think was earning the respect that they deserve. It's one of it is a more dangerous job. More towmen and women die each year than firefighters and policemen combined.
No.
So
I had no idea.
It's a really interesting fact. So, for all of your listeners out there, one of the things I always say, and it's a big theme in our industry, is move over. And what that means is that when you see an emergency vehicle, especially tow, trucks on the side of the road, do not pass them in the adjacent lane.
Mm-hmm.
You move over as far as humanly possible because that's how they lose their lives. And so something we learned early, where we said we really want to think about how we treat our network, pay our network fairly, promote safety in our network along those lines. And so all of those things kind of helped open the floodgates. And I think the other enterprises in this industry that utilize this service kind of saw that, and it's still happening today. We still have lots of work to do. There's still plenty of companies out there that aren't as familiar with Honk as we'd like them to be, but we're working on that. But we genuinely feel we have the best product in the industry with the most fundamental soundness around how we play in this ecosystem in a fair and efficient way.
It's interesting you brought up I was going to ask you about how do you manage because you've mentioned it a couple times, the professionalism of the driver, of the guy driving the tow truck. And you just talked about that, because I think maybe all of us have this image of the tow truck driver who's kind of a little bit of a
rough and tumble.
Loose. Yes, very well said. Yeah. And showing up on the side of the road, and that may be an unfair characterization, but you've taken that step. And was that something because you had some experience that was unsavory, or did you just think, wait, safety is our premier goal with our customer?
We never had a bad experience, and honestly, to this day, I hope there's something I can knock on here, but have not had a major incident in 10 years of operating. And so I think that speaks to the level of attention we've put on safety. And you know, some of these guys are rough and tumble, and some of them probably wear that as a badge of honor, right? But it doesn't mean they're not kind or really professional or very good at what they do. Quite honestly, the vast, vast majority of them are. There are bad apples. They will admit there's bad apples, and those bad apples give them a bad name. And so the good providers out there hate that when guys give them a bad name because of, you know, a lack of professionalism in one way or another. So, but we just do a lot of work with our network, and it's about communicating. It's telling them when they're doing things right. It's allowing them to achieve what we call honk hero status, which the higher your status, it's, you know, the more you're going to get dispatched out to and get preferential, you know, algorithmic treatment to get dispatched on a particular piece of particular piece of work, because we need that safe, professional. It's fine if they're rough and tumble, right?
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone looks their own way, and that's okay. But kindness and professionalism, you know, are a necessity, and we work with our network all the time on that kind of stuff. And by and large, we think we've got the best network, you know, in this industry. And those NPS numbers that I shared with you, they're partially because we're pretty good at our technology, but I got to give the credit to them because they're the ones who are the touch points with those people, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Okay, as COO of Honk, I'm curious about how much you rely on all of your experience growing up, being in different communities, different parts of the world, hockey,
Right.
obviously being in Palo Alto. Do you ever find yourself like were you kind of groomed to be a COO from the beginning? All of those experiences led you to this? Or is that part of your personality? Or how much do you lean on all of your experience in the stuff that you do today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a little of each. I'd attribute half of it to my personality and half of it to my lived experiences growing up. Because, you know, combined, I'm an obsessively organized person, you know, and if my family were listening, they would be chuckling and saying how annoying I probably am. But I'm very organized in it, and the ability to kind of keep a lot of things straight and running on the right track at the same time is something I feel like I'm pretty good at. But then there's that lived experience, as you talked about, which gives that layer of kind of empathy and ability to maybe lead people and motivate people and direct people in a way that is not, you know, dictatorial or micromanagerial, but more collaborative and servant type leadership, where, you know, it would be wrong of us to say point a finger at a service provider and say, you did this like wrong. And you know, we take a different approach. It's more collaborative. How could we help you? You know, how can we give you information on certain drivers so you as a business owner can make better decisions?
Sure.
Things like that. So I think by and large, a COO or even a CEO, I think those are, and then the last piece is also just being comfortable in public speaking, presenting, selling, you know, all of those things I've done in throughout my career. And when you kind of match up the empathy and the kindness that I think is important with the organization and the attention to detail, with that public persona, I think it lends itself well to being in these kind of positions. And you know, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah. What are the things that you think you do really well? What do you guys do really well within the walls of Honk?
There's a couple things. The first is we are data driven to the core, and that came from Corey and Rick and me at the beginning, everything was just done based on what the data showed us. We have the expression that opinions are always interesting but irrelevant, right? And another expression that we call nihito, which is nothing interesting happens inside the office, meaning, you've got to get out there to understand what you need to build. And then you've got to look at the data and the numbers to tell you if what you're building is correct. And so we test meticulously at the company. We try to innovate all the time. And so those are the things that I think we talked about it earlier, that what gets us to those higher numbers of, faster ETAs, more professionalism. It's just lots of little things that you do within a company. Another one that I'll just touch on is what I kind of think of as professional integrity, and that is about picking up the phone like when it rings. It's about answering an email within a couple of minutes. It's about responding to a Slack immediately, even if it's to say I'm on the phone, right? And I'll get back to you. It's when you get an inbound lead that you respond right away, because there's so much noise in business, as you know, and the ones that I think separate themselves and that separate us as being good partners is that, one, we want to innovate, we want to be partners, we don't want to be a vendor. We don't want people to come to us and say, go and do our towing and roadside or vehicle transport or warranty, work. We want them to say, we've got good ideas. You are great technologists. Let's partner together and innovate. And so I think when you couple that with data-driven, methodology and that professional integrity, we become very good partners for enterprises. And so I think that's what kind of differentiates us in our space.
It's so good. It's really good stuff that you talk about. And some of those things are themes that we hear in the podcast, and the one that you just mentioned, responsiveness, that seems to come up regularly, and it's meaningful. It's really important.
It's so it's really, of all the things that a business has to do, there's really hard stuff, right? There's there's modeling and making tough decisions on what to invest in and what acquiring, merging, right? There's really complicated stuff. So when you compare that to, again, I bucket it as professional integrity, just do that stuff, right? Because everyone knows how to do it. You don't really have to learn it. You just have to demand it of the people that are around you. And once they do, it's kind of, it gets pervasive pretty quickly, and then you separate yourselves.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you a tough question. Where are areas where you think you could improve?
At Honk, hiring is always, just we'd like to think we're good hirers, but we end up with some people every once in a while. And I'd say so I'd love to improve our hiring capabilities. I don't think, when hiring is very difficult, I don't think the biggest mistake of hiring is the hiring itself. I think the biggest mistake is being committed to the first 3 to 6 months, calling it, of assessment, and being honest with yourself and saying, this is not working out. We're going to have to move on from this person. And so I think that's where we could be better, and I could be better personally, is focusing more on those 3 to 6 months and really spending the time, because you're busy doing lots of stuff, but it's important to do that assessment and make sure you've got the right person at that point. So all of that stuff, I think we'd like to keep getting better at.
That brings up an interesting question, I think, in the people that you're hiring. Do people not fit the organization because they don't have the skill to fit in the organization, or because they're not a good fit culturally in the organization?
A little of each sometimes. I mean, it could be both, and we think both of those things are obviously incredibly important. They are to every organization. And one of the things with our company is that our leadership team has been together all 10 years, which is a little, I think, unusual. A lot of times you'll have some people coming and going, but by and large, the people that we do like tend to stay, which hopefully speaks well about our culture. And those that end up leaving, I think, it's either their skill set just isn't what we thought it was, or culturally, even though you present yourself well in an interview, it's just so hard. It's so hard in a handful of interviews to simulate what does every day for 6 months look like. So it's such a hard practice, and it's a little of each.
Gotcha. Okay. We're moving into the segment of the podcast that I call 3 random questions.
Love it.
So these could be anything.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about them as we've been talking. I think the obvious one is, who's the greatest hockey player of all time and why?
Yeah, it's not hard. It's Wayne Gretzky.
Is it even close?
It's not even close. I believe the stat is that he has more assists than any other player has goals and assists combined.
I think you're right.
And so, if I may elaborate for a moment,
Absolutely.
There's 2 things about Wayne that I think are extraordinary and rare. One is, and of course everyone knows the famous quote that he said, which is, you pass the puck to where it's going as opposed to where the player has been. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. The 2 things that I know about Wayne is one is the fact that he had that many assists, right? Just showed that for as prolific a goal scorer he was, for him it was always looking to set someone else up. And by the way, this could be cheesy, but there's lots of business analogies, right, that can be drawn from hockey and from that concept of, even in selling, right? Like doing good, nice things for other people just for the sake of doing it often leads to, success in sales. But back to Wayne for a second, he was always thinking about setting others up, and he was the greatest of all time with the most immense amount of humility that one could imagine out of a superstar. And you don't see that typically in phenomenal football players or basketball players or baseball players. And it's a unique thing to Wayne, and maybe even more broadly in hockey, where it's all about deflecting credit, honestly, and I love that too in HONK, right? I talk about our network being the thing that makes us so successful, and our frontline people, right? Because that's the kind of leader that I want to be. That's the kind of leader that he was. He was a captain, but not very loud.
Yeah.
Like, he's not the guy in the locker room shouting and banging his stick. He's just setting the example. And people followed him like, he won 4 Stanley Cups. And so that was, to answer your question, he's far and away the greatest, of all time, and for those good reasons.
I bet we could do a whole podcast on business lessons, just being around a guy like Wayne Gretzky. And I'm sure that you had I don't know how long that experience was, but you had some period of time where you got to experience everything that he did,
right?
Which would have been fascinating. Okay, right. There's lots of talk about Connor McDavid, and could he surpass? Could he? But I don't know. I love watching Connor McDavid play.
Yes,
but he doesn't seem to have the effect on a game that Gretzky did when he was playing.
He's electric, for certain, and I love watching him play too. I really want to see him succeed. I saw a video online the other day of him in the locker room, and it's not the way Wayne carried himself, right? It was the opposite of what I described, the way that Wayne led. And so, but there's lots of leadership styles out there, and it depends on who you're trying to lead. But I think he's going to be really successful. It's too early to know what his trajectory will be from a statistical perspective, but I think he's just a once in a generational kind of figure, and it's only been a handful of hockey since we've been alive, right? There's the Gretzkys and the Messiers, and then maybe Crosby, Ovechkin, and now McDavid, and there's a few coming after, but it's an exciting time because it's getting to be a lot about skill, and that's really fun to watch.
It's unbelievable what those guys can do.
Yeah.
Okay, next random, maybe not so random question. Just knowing a little bit and talking a little bit about your organization, which is king in HONK? Is it culture or is it strategy?
I would say it's culture if I had to. Strategy is important. But you are not going to stay working for HONK if you cannot buy into the culture. And the culture, in my eyes, it starts with kindness. I mean, I hate to sound so soft here. I actually don't hate to sound so soft. It's honestly, we look for people that are kind and empathetic, and then we look for people who are equally as intelligent and committed to working hard. And so I think that, and by the way, we intentionally try to create as diverse an environment as we possibly can amongst older people, younger people, races and ethnicities, and everything else under the sun, to try to foster great ideas from wherever they may come, whether it's people on the phones on the front line or anywhere else. And it's open. You can talk to the CEO, you can talk to me, you can talk to anyone at any time for any reason without a specific need, right? And we talk about things. We don't sweep things under the rug. So it's very open and communicative. So if you fit into this culture, you're going to be successful there, because I think strategy, as long as you're smart, as I talked about, good strategy will come out of smart people if you can fit into that culture. So if I had to choose one, it would say you've got to, the culture at HONK is incredibly strong.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that's better for an organization than culture that's aligned, and nothing more damaging, even if you have one or two players who are not aligned, and how that can take down an organization. So I would align with that.
And sometimes when I interview people, or used to, and they would say that this company or that company treated me this way or that way, and it just always strikes me like companies are so dumb in the way that they treat their people and deal with turnover and retention and things like that, where if you just do basic human decency kind of stuff in your organization, you're going to flourish. And, I even look around, you can walk into an office like I have yours today, and you can observe relationships and the way people talk to each other, and what you see and feel. And it's like palpable. It's tangible when you walk into a positive culture.
Yeah.
And it's equally as tangible when you don't.
When you don't, absolutely. And nothing, I mean, I think we could probably take that to the sports side, the athletics realm, and it's the same way.
For sure.
Good culture wins.
Yes.
Bad culture, even with the most talent, doesn't win.
No question.
Okay, last random question. If you could only have one type of food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's going to be so boring. Dark chocolate covered pretzels. I mean, I can't stop eating them. Once one hits the mouth, it's like, I don't know where, I'm very disciplined. I'm a very disciplined person about what I eat and what I do all the time. But that's the one thing that unlocks that undisciplined key in my brain, which says, just keep going. Like, don't stop until you've exhausted all of the supply in your house or some store.
I didn't expect, I mean, lots of people say like I will Mexican food. I have to have or like
sushi. I do love sushi.
or
but,
sushi.
Yeah.
But I would say pizza, and people are like pizza, and I was like yes, because pizza can be every meal. Like you can put eggs and
true.
bacon on pizza. You can put
right.
sausage and pepperoni on pizza, and you can put cinnamon sugar on pizza. Like it's every meal.
You
every
put cinnamon sugar on pizza?
Oh, you can put. Have you ever had
I didn't know that was possible.
a cinnamon
I know
sugar?
it was physically possible, but I didn't know it was.
If you've never had a cinnamon sugar pizza, oh yeah, now that's really good.
Wow,
That's your dessert
you should
pizza.
Patent that or something.
Well, I would, except I think most pizza places
know
do
that?
that now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I gotta
dessert.
try that.
It's the dessert pizza. You could probably put dark chocolate covered pretzels on a pizza.
Maybe. Yes, maybe.
But you might just pick them off.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But I love pizza too.
So I didn't expect dark chocolate covered pretzels as your go-to food for the rest of your life. Okay, I've already kept you for an hour. I don't want to keep you much longer, but I would like to know, like, what are some of the things that you've done, or some of the habits that you have, or podcasts that you listen to, books that you read? What are the meaningful things that you do to kind of keep yourself informed, engaged, and moving forward?
That's a good question. I really I love podcasts. I listen to the New York Rangers podcast because they're my team. I listen to a lot Smartless for my comedy. I listen to
Which is very funny.
I listen to a lot of kind of How I Built That. I think it's Guy Raz. Which kind of is my entrepreneurial, interest. And then I listen to a lot about Bitcoin because that's another passion of mine. And so I think those are the four things. And then I obviously follow the news and politics very closely. We won't get into it, but I need to know what's going on all of those fronts
as
as
do
well.
I. Yes, absolutely. Okay, if you look back, can you pick out a favorite book that you've read?
Favorite book? I tend to not remember all the books very well over the years.
It's a terrible question for me too, because I can never remember. It's always like, well, I most recently read
exactly,
this, and I really liked it.
I mean, one of my favorite books, and I don't even remember the title, but it was a sales book that I read back in the 90s or something. And back to that point of just the key to sales is doing nice things for other people, introducing them to other people, offering your advisory assistance to other people, like paying it forward in sales, I think is. So anyway, that was a sales book I read a long time ago. I can't remember. Maybe I don't have a favorite, but I read Bill Browder's Red Notice. I don't know if you've read that, but
I've not.
Really interesting about the Magnitsky Act and the way in which all the complexities of Russia and the United States and the relationships there. And so that was a great book. But no, these days it's less time for reading and a lot of family and a lot of podcasts when I have a moment.
Yeah. Could you boil down your life philosophy into a quote or a phrase?
One of my favorites is a quote. I think that it says, "Hope is nothing more than having something to look forward to." And I've always gravitated to that because life's hard for lots of people, right? In a lot of different ways, and everyone's got their own thing going on. And when you realize everyone's got their own, issues, and that no one's perfect, and whatever you see on LinkedIn or social media, and resisting and being good at resisting that, I think is really important. And so having hope is really key. I also, I keep these three things in mind all the time. I think about looking forward, looking inward, and looking up. And looking forward is about not fretting decisions in the past that you can't change at this point. It's also not fretting over things of which you have no control, because it's easy to get in that habit if you don't stop it. Looking inward is about resisting the temptation on LinkedIn or social media to say, how am I not that successful, right? Or how come my kid is not doing that, right? And so really being disciplined to look inward, because it's all about yourself, your family, your friends. And then looking up was about looking to the stars and, feeling lucky about whatever it is you have. And everyone's got something. It may be just that, your brother's coming to town, whatever it is, right? You've got something to be lucky in life about, and to try to focus on that, because at the end of the day, life can be difficult, and so for me, those three things are kind of what keeps me going and centered without going off the rails.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's a fantastic place to end the podcast. It's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate the insight,
likewise,
and the thoughtful answers, and I think I gained a lot out of this. I know our listeners will as well. And HONK is a great company. It's a fantastic company. Continued success to you and to your partners and to everybody else. Matt Bijur, we couldn't thank you enough for your time.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.